right, welcome into Rise to the Victors. We're talking week 2 of college football here. Michigan beats Hawaii handedly, but nobody, again, similar to last week how we opened the show, nobody's talking about the game itself. It's quite similar to Colorado State in that the entire topic of conversation is the quarterback competition, except this time we have answers and a conclusion, at least for now. J.J. McCarthy is Michigan's starting quarterback. Jim Harbaugh declared that following the game, and hard for him not to, right? I think JJ made this whole thing pretty easy, and we will dive into that. We'll also talk today about a multitude of things involving the game between Michigan and Hawaii, what to look for next week. We'll get some recruiting updates from Libby, and we'll go from there. I'm Brandon Justice, joined by Josh Henschke, Trevor McHugh, Zach Libby, Davis Mosley, and Brock Heilig. And we are the Maize Blue Review. I think this is everybody, right? We're missing maybe Dennis. That's about it. But this is about the crew right here. And every single week after Michigan's game on Saturday, we get together on Sunday night and record this for you, this roundtable, which comes out on Monday morning. You can watch it on YouTube if you're listening. And if you're listening, then you know you can get it on Apple and Spotify. So with all the housekeeping out of the way and the introductions out of the way, we can dive into the beef of the show. So we will go to Josh first to talk about the obvious. I mean, we could sit here and come up with a divisive plan to leave the quarterback conversation for the last segment of the show, which probably is the smarter thing to do to keep people engaged for longer. But in an effort to keep our audience clear that we're genuine folks, we're going to start it off with the QB competition and get that out of the way. So, Josh, is what you saw from McCarthy on Saturday night and a bit of a synopsis on the situation that's now apparently concluded.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that it concluded the way it did. I thought there might be a little bit more dramatics leading up until Monday, but it's good that Harbaugh just kind of just cut it right there and gave you everything. Was pretty transparent about it as well. So I mean, and again, I mean, he doesn't really have any reason to keep it suspenseful. I mean, it's pretty darn clear what direction this thing was headed, coming right out of the gates on Saturday too. So, yeah, I mean, what more can you say? I mean, JJ was 11 for 12, 2 touchdowns, played really well, showed command of the offense. We got to keep, the opponent in mind as well the same way, but I mentioned this on Twitter, is that you can't scheme talent. You can scheme around your talent, but your guys have to do, they have to make these, running out of the pocket, throwing across and hitting, Cornelius Johnson in the corner of the end zone. Your guys have to throw the ball 40 yards downfield to Cornelius Johnson and stuff like that. So it's plays like that that we've heard so much about from camp that JJ can do. We kind of saw that culminating the first 2 weeks of the season here. And, ultimately, it culminated into JJ being the guy. And again, you can't really make an argument against him at this point. I mean, yeah, he's not going to go, 11 for 12 every week, of course, but, to play mistake-free football, to, looking calm in the pocket, not looking like he's forcing anything, and he looks like he's just playing his game. I don't think you can ask for anything more than what, JJ has given you the past 2 weeks. So it'll be really interesting to see what he can do against UConn. I mean, because again, this is another Hawaii-like team in UConn that is not very good. And so, he could have another successful day again. And all of that helps, towards the future. All that experience adds up. But yeah, I mean, it's good to kind of have a little bit of finality in all of this, and just kind of, we can look towards the future now and hypothesize about what JJ is going to do leading the offense instead of what ifs and, buts and all that stuff. So we actually have some concrete evidence now and some concrete factual stuff that, we can base future arguments on. So, yeah, I mean, all in all, good day, pretty much a good day in all facets. And, yeah, you just got to keep it moving.
Yeah, I think you kind of said it best towards the end there when you were just like, I mean, yeah, just a good day. Like, how else can you really wrap up what J.J. McCarthy did on Saturday. I mean,
Mhm.
Harbaugh said it best after the game. He was as close to flawless as flawless gets, or whatever he said. I know I'm paraphrasing there, but I mean, what he did on Saturday matched with what he did in limited time last Saturday. To have all but one drive and in a touchdown, doesn't matter what you're up against. Like who's going to outperform that? I know the big deal here is that everyone's making, I think, is that McNamara's play is what kind of dictated this. But I don't think that's the case. Like I think Cade plays his best, and he still doesn't equate what JJ's done from a scoring output, from a quote unquote points per drive perspective, right? Like we keep hearing Harbaugh and Weiss reference, and I think that's what it all comes down to, is that this is how good McCarthy is. It's a credit to how good McCarthy is. He still has a ton to prove, and I get that, but I think that the distance in this race had everything to do with McCarthy rather than it did with the lack thereof from McNamara, despite the fact that McNamara did play pretty bad, right? Like all things considered, pretty
Yeah.
rough. So we will hand it off to Trevor, who is coming back after his 1 week hiatus. And he is, I think, one of the better pulses on the beat, following things from start to finish. So what you saw yesterday, were you at home yesterday watching the game?
Yeah, I was.
So at home yesterday, what were you able to see from your point of view that maybe you didn't know about McCarthy before the game? I know that we had seen McCarthy in limited time, whether that be last year as a spell to McNamara, or we saw him like last week in limited time. But really, this was our first time seeing him in a start. Is there anything he did that you didn't know he could do going into that game, or maybe you heard he could do and you just wanted it to be proven?
I guess I kind of, off of what Josh said, he was maybe a little calmer than I expected. He wasn't forcing as much as we kind of thought he would, right? So, this whole quarterback battle really had a bunch of water poured on it because of JJ's injury rehab, right? I think we talked a couple times about, in the spring game when Cade struggled, what would the conversation have been if JJ had been around, right? In the summer and then going early into fall. But Harbaugh never buried JJ, insisted on letting the competition come. And then, that last week of practice, it sounds like that's where JJ really took a big step and was starting to limit some of the mistakes that we were hearing about in camp. So I kind of thought in this game, he was going to be wired up a little bit and maybe make a small mistake. I mean, we knew he was going to add an element to the run game that was going to allow the running backs to play well. We knew he might, bust off a few runs, which he only did the one. He could throw a deep ball and maybe take some chances. But I just found more often than not, he looked a lot calmer, which is what he needed to do to win this job, right? Execute the offense, still show that playmaking ability, but not, go too far to the point that you start making mistakes. Now, it's only Hawaii. He's going to make mistakes as we get into the season. That's going to be part of the learning curve. But little things like Ronnie Bell called it out today, and I noticed in the game, the read option with Edwards that he threw the touchdown to Bell. He held that thing there to the very last second. And Bell said that was supposed to be a handoff. That was all JJ that saw something, right? So this battle really came down to a lot of talk about Cade's pre-snap adjustments and his reads that he makes. That play, along with the touchdown to Cornelius, where JJ sees an opportunity to get into a gap in the pocket where he can either take off and run or make that throw to Cornelius in the corner. That's a play Cade just can't make, and it becomes a touchdown. I mean, we knew JJ had that, but he just looked calm doing it. So yeah, like you said, to go out there and not just play really well, but borderline perfect, not just be the best quarterback on the field, but through 2 games, he's Michigan's best player. I think football's such a team sport, and with these competitions, it's so much more of an individual battle. Cade's better than what we've seen the last 2 games. I think we're just seeing, whether you want to compare it to a tennis match or boxing or whatever, Cade's been betting on himself all season and all off season, excuse me. And I think there's just this realization that, man, I'm going to lose this job. And, that's a tough thing to deal with. So I think that impacted him. That throw, the interception, like Jake Butt said, he didn't even step into it. And the way he reacted, the frustration, you could tell he's just, he lost, and it's a tough deal. So I hope he bounces back. There's still going to be a big role for him on this team. He's a leader. But yeah, JJ won this job plain and simple, as handedly as he could, and really help Jim Harbaugh out, because this was an awkward situation that, Harbaugh proposed, and JJ gave him the perfect result.
All right, let's shift things over to the defense and not beat a dead horse too much on the quarterback. We might wrap around back to that towards the end of the show, but let's talk defense a little bit. Hard to really learn anything from Michigan's defense. Like I thoroughly believe we won't know anything genuine about what this defense is and what it's going to be until Maryland. But based on what we know about these past 2 weeks, what we've seen these last 2 weeks, going into UConn, expect to see much the same. No health issues. It looks like everything's pretty clean there for the defense. But Brock, we'll arrow it over to you about the defense and maybe something you've learned about the defense through, I know that it's like a grain of salt type of thing, but if you could just something you've learned about the defense you haven't seen yet, or you didn't see or expect before the season. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, and I think you said it best. I mean, it's hard to really take too much away when your first two opponents are Colorado State and Hawaii. But I mean, something that I've taken away from these first two games is just how deep they are. On the defensive line, we touched on it last week after they had 7 sacks against Colorado State. The defensive line kind of took a step back yesterday. We saw Hawaii's game plan was to get the ball out early and kind of avoid taking those sacks from the defensive line. But Junior Colson, Rod Moore, two guys that are really stepping up there at linebacker and in the backfield. And another guy that has really caught my attention is Mike Sainristil. I think there was a bit of skepticism as to how he was going to fill that role at nickel, moving over from receiver. But he it looks like he's just everywhere. He's running around making plays. So it's just, at least in my opinion, it looks like a very well-rounded, deep defense that, like you said, we may not know a lot about until Maryland, maybe not Iowa for sure, but Penn State or Michigan State, definitely October. We'll get to learn a little bit more about them.
All right. Elsewhere around the Big Ten, there's been a lot of chaos. And Davis, I know you're in the South, down in Georgia, and the Bulldogs are on top. They're number 1 now this week, overtaking Alabama after Bama struggled with Tennessee. Being where you're at and the territory that you're in, Michigan fans know Georgia well after the college football playoff semifinal last year. And I know that a lot of people are getting maybe ahead of themselves, like Jim Harbaugh said I was, #dunk. A lot of people are getting ahead of themselves thinking that, hey, McCarthy might be the guy who gets us past the beast that is Georgia, or maybe he's the one who will slay the dragon of Georgia, Bama, whoever it may be. So, Davis, in your territory where you're at, and from what you've seen from Georgia, I know you're following them just as closely as Michigan. How equal of a playing field do you think McCarthy makes this offense going up against Georgia? And then again, speaking to the defense, I know we can't learn a whole lot, but what kind of, I guess, counters do you think they could have to Stetson Bennett and Georgia's attack?
Yeah, so Georgia's looked like the best team in the country through, 2 games or whatever. They rightfully so have been ranked number 1 following this week's poll. So rightfully so, they're number 1. As far as it goes with Michigan stacking up against the Alabamas, the Georgias, and even the Ohio States, you have to think that they're right there. With McCarthy, it's just a different game. I mean, it is a different ball game on offense. And no disrespect to Cade McNamara, he was huge for Michigan last year, absolutely huge. And this is the way I put it. I said, without McNamara, Michigan most likely doesn't make the playoff last year. And I think, for as far as it goes this year, I think without McCarthy, they don't make the playoff this year. They're going to have to put up 40 points to beat these teams. To beat Georgia, to beat Alabama, you're going to have to put up 40 points. Stetson Bennett has looked like a killer so far. They threw up 49 on Oregon whenever it was last week. Alabama, while they struggled against Texas, they have a killer offense. They've got the Heisman Trophy winner, and C.J. Stroud is right there, who might likely bring the Heisman home this year. McCarthy is that different element that Michigan needs, and quite frankly hasn't had under Jim Harbaugh. They haven't offense, and McCarthy presents that opportunity for Michigan. the best way to put it is McCarthy takes Michigan's offense to a different level and puts them onto that playing field with these teams. And that's the best way I can put it on offense. And as far as defense goes, Michigan's defense looks as well-rounded as any across the country. From the line to the linebackers to the defensive backs, they've got it at all three levels. So you have to feel very confident about where they're sitting right now.
Yeah, we'll see how they stack up, but the speed of the defense certainly would be my biggest takeaway so far as to what we can see as a contrast from last season that might help them when it comes time for playoff football, if in fact they get there. We will go over to Zach Libby, aka the GOAT, who is going to give us a little intel on recruiting. So Michigan, maybe by design, had JJ McCarthy's first start be a big recruiting weekend, including Jaden Davis, who we all should know by now. And if you're at home listening and you don't know, he's Michigan's number one quarterback target. And I mean, arguably their top target overall in recruiting, regardless of the class right now, even though he is a junior. So take us through who was at Michigan on Saturday, the key visitors, a core group of the visitors, and takeaways from their visits so far.
I know I got here late, but I just realized that Davis has dreads. So
don't worry, that was a pre-show conversation. Would have loved to have you there, but we'll certainly recap it after.
As a shaved head man, I'm jealous. This was I know it's Hawaii, but the fact that it's like Michigan's 12th night game in its history, Michigan really pulled out the carpet in terms of bringing in these targets. We can start off with Jane Davis, out of Providence Day, 5-star quarterback. He got a front row seat. If you saw him on the sidelines, which I did, he was right up front. So next to him was Channing Goodwin, another visitor, 3-star wide receiver in Michigan legacy. And obviously he's the son of Jonathan Goodwin, the former offensive lineman for Michigan. With Providence Day, I know only 2 went. In the past, there's been 4 for the barbecue, but it really didn't make a difference. The other 2, Chris Peel is going to come back next week for the UConn game, and then Jordan Shipp is going to be back sometime this season. He was originally supposed to go, but unfortunately had to cancel. Regardless of what this quality of opponent or, knowing that Michigan was supposed to win by 53.5 or something. This was very an important visit weekend, just to show the atmosphere of under the lights. And despite the rain maybe having a little bit of a say in how many people, especially the students who attended, there was still a really good crowd, and they were raucous and it was loud. We've been getting initial reactions from these top targets. 2 of the 24 commits were both on campus. All the in-state commits for the 23 class were on campus. And then some of the uncommitteds that are, scheduled that are priority targets, like Brady Priestcorn, 24 tight end out of Rochester Adams. Brian Robinson, 24 Rivals 250 outside linebacker of Youngstown, Ohio, who has a family connection with Steve Klinksdale. Pretty much every West Bloomfield player that Michigan is going after was there, including Jameer Benjamin, Bryce Rowe, obviously Samaj Morgan and Amir Herring were there too. Other ones that were key visitors, basketball, for instance, John Bull, the 5-star center, was in attendance for his official visit. Trey McKinney, the Orchard Lake St. Mary's combo guard, who's the number 1 player in the state of Michigan. He's a 2025 player, very heavily favoring Michigan. Other commits for the 2023 class, Brooks Bear was there. That was his first game after committing. And then some others. I'm trying to think of the top of my head. There was Davis. There was Goodwin. There was Jake Guarnera, the 3-star tackle out of Ponte Verde, Florida, who's been there twice so far. It wasn't exactly the highest total number of recruits, but the people that they got on campus were important. These in-state commits, especially, having their presence there pretty much at every home game will allow for more player recruiting. And then final thing before I hand it off to you, with JJ McCarthy especially, we've learned a lot about him this summer, about him going out of his way to establish connections with players that Michigan has on their board. Jane Davis, especially considering that they're getting really good friends. Like you said, it probably wasn't too much of a surprise that he visited for his first career start. But yeah, no, if you were staying at the game afterwards, and you saw JJ running through the tunnel, you would see that he was taking photos with pretty much every recruit that was standing on the field. He talked to pretty much every recruit that was still there. He got a photo I saw him take a photo with one player, Brian Robinson, who we just mentioned. I actually just talked to him right before this podcast, and he said JJ is really starting to really go out of his way to just be that face for this program. If there's any player that can lead the cause in helping Michigan lead to getting top classes in 23 and 24 and even 25, it's going to be JJ, and having him start is only going to propel that. So I think it was it just worked out so well for his performance, and then his personality. So overall, it's a good weekend, and we'll have reactions and full features coming out this week.
All right, well, let's talk stock reports, and after 2 weeks, we'll talk about who's up and who's down. We'll go around the table, and each of us can pick quickly someone who's up and someone who is down on your look. If someone else picks your person or your player, you can double dip. It's okay. Just if it's been done twice or 3 times, those are our only rules. If it's getting redundant, don't do it. All right. Obviously, JJ McCarthy is off limits because he is clearly up, and Cade McNamara, conversely, is clearly down. So we'll leave the quarterbacks off limits. Don't repeat 3 times. Those are your only rules, guys. All right. I will anchor, and I'll get it last. We will start it off with Josh. What's your stock report, Mr. Sir?
Yeah, I think my big, the big stock up for me is CJ Stokes. That would be, he's really on that upward trajectory, and I really think Michigan has got something with him, and especially heading into UConn week, I highly doubt at this point in time, and as we record this on a Sunday, I highly doubt that Donovan Edwards is going to play next weekend. He's been nursing a bit of a bum ankle that he suffered in the second half. In the late first half, but didn't appear in the second half. He'll be okay. It's not like they're not too concerned with it, but out of precaution, I think unless he miraculously improves during the week, I think they'll sit him out and rest him. So my stock up is a little bit half of what he was able to do during the game, and half of what he could do this week in a more expanded role, and with the first team offensive line, first team offense, and stuff like that. I really interested to see how he's going to grow throughout the year, because I really think they've got something there. And credit to Mike Hart for not only identifying the guy, but training him, coaching him up. That guy walked in off out of a high school field and right into the team in the summer, and has done really well and has really ascended. And then I think that trajectory is only going to go up from here. So CJ Stokes is my pick.
All right. With that in mind, we will hand it off to Trevor, who is the gatekeeper of the stock reports. So I'm sure his answer won't be too difficult. If you guys don't know, Trevor does a weekly stock report for the site, so make sure you check that out. But Trevor, take us into your big stock. I guess your buy right now would be your buy. Who are you buying on Michigan's team right now?
Yeah, my biggest stock up guy is Roman Wilson. In the offseason, with how deep the wide receiver room was, we were kind of talking about, who's going to be wide receiver 1 or who's going to be the deep threat, all these different roles they were going to share. Cornelius Johnson and Ronnie Bell both kind of have a inside track to the true, possession receiver role. But I thought we were going to see Wilson and Anthony kind of splitting time on the outside, and Ronnie Bell and Henning primarily in the slot. And in the first 2 games, Roman Wilson has spent all of his snaps in the slot. And I think that is Matt Weiss's NFL fingerprints all over it. If you look at what the slot receiver is in the NFL right now. It's not just the smallest wide receiver anymore that runs little slant routes or curls. It's your biggest deep threat. It's the guy that can take the roof off at any moment. We've seen Wilson do that on a deep ball, on a short pass where he got yards after contact, and on an end around. So with him getting all those snaps in the slot, and then at this point securely in what I would call the third receiver role behind Johnson and Bell, he's my highest stock rate guy right now. I think he's going to end up leading this team in receiving.
All right, we will hand it off to Brock. Who you buying, sir?
Yeah, Trevor kind of stole my pick, and I'm not going to go back to back on Roman Wilson. And to be honest, there's really no one on the team besides, like McNamara that's really trending down. So I think I'll take Cornelius Johnson. We saw yesterday his 54-yard reception down the middle of the field in the first half, and then late in the second quarter, his touchdown on that beautiful throw from McCarthy. He's got a real chance to establish himself as a big outside receiver. Like Trevor was kind of saying, Roman Wilson kind of sliding into the slot there. Cornelius Johnson, he may not be seen as the biggest deep threat, but he's a very steady
30.5 yards per target yesterday. So
yeah, exactly.
A little bit of one.
Yeah. So he's definitely got some potential there, especially with McCarthy there behind center.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can just tell Johnson's always had the hands to handle zip like McCarthy has. And you saw yesterday, the only incompletion he had was a drop to Ronnie. I think, bless his heart, Ronnie this is too much. It looked like a 99-mile-an-hour cutter. I know it was a little behind him, but yeah, yesterday, Cornelius Johnson, and yesterday being Saturday, because tonight is Sunday, if you're listening at home on Monday, but 2 catches for 71 yards for Cornelius Johnson yesterday. Obviously the touchdown, like you mentioned, and also the big target, the big 54-yarder. So, but those were both of his targets yesterday. So we'll go from Brock to Davis. Davis, who are you buying on Michigan football, sir? Or selling? You could pick either or.
I'm going to go off the wall on this one. You said no rules. So
this is not a shock. I'm
going to go off the wall.
David Scoops is going off the wall.
I'm buying Matt Weiss because with J.J. McCarthy at quarterback, the play calling completely changes. And I'm absolutely buying it. Like Trevor said, putting Roman Wilson in the slot as his fingerprints all over it. I am buying Matt Weiss and his play calling ability, and that is that. I mean, you're going to see plays that you couldn't run last year. There's going to be play calling that was not able to be had last year. That's my take. I think you're going to see a lot more diversity, a lot more versatile play call. So that's who I am. I go off the wall on most things. So I hope that was acceptable.
Yeah, it's a good wild card. I think you're absolutely right. Matt Weiss is a brain among anything else as it pertains to Michigan football. He was. I think we're seeing, based on what Josh. I don't know if you guys have watched the Josh Gaddis tape in Miami yet, but it's a work in progress. So I think we're starting to see the potential revelation of what was the variable in Michigan's offense last year. I don't think it was McNamara. I think he absolutely did the job. But I think we're going to start to see, and I think Matt Weiss is a great answer, Davey, and I think that's who it is. I think that is the variable. So, Libby, who you buying or who you selling before I anchor us up?
Giovanni El-Hadi. He got the start after the injuries to Barnhart and Hayes. Yeah, Hayes last week, and then he saw significant playing time this week. I know he's not going to be a full-time starter this year, but with the significant reps that he's getting, he's going to start next year. So, him.
Great pick. I think he's a guy that we've been keeping an eye on since his commitment, and he was an early commit too, back in his recruiting days. But he's one we've always kept an eye on. I will wrap us up in this little topic here, and I'm going to talk selling. I'm going to talk about 3 players, but not because you guys all picked one, just because nobody picked to sell. So I'm going to compensate because I had these. I was choosing between these 3, but it all worked out. I'm going to go with both tight ends, and Andrel Anthony, because we'll start with the tight ends. I mean, they each have 1 catch per game. I mean, there's 2 catches total. Eric All's been, he had a really nice catch from Cade in game 1. and had a nice first down pickup from JJ in game 2. But haven't seen much out of Schoon either. Really, the best play from a tight end was Max Bredeson's play, the long one, but we just haven't seen that from the tight ends. Now, started to talk about the differences and what happens when Matt Weiss starts to control the offense with JJ in. How often do we see those double tight end sets, and how often are those double tight end sets used to run and not at all used for the pass? And starts to make you wonder how much more involved they're going to be in the vertical game compared to last year, and whether that's going to be greater or lesser. I think Harbaugh refuses to not get those guys involved in the bigger games, so I think that they're certainly going to. In fact, I might say they're buyers right now because you can buy the dip on them. Like, I still think they're going to be great, but just not so much through two. Andrell Anthony, on the other hand, we knew this was going to happen, right? Like, the wide receiver room it's overpopulated, and there's just so many mouths to feed, and it's super early, so there's like no real concrete takeaways we can, and especially in the games that we've been forced to watch so far. There isn't really anything concrete you can take away from the wide receiver room as a whole, but Andrell Anthony having one catch through 2 games was not on my bingo sheet, to be honest with you. I just didn't see that coming, especially the fact that when JJ got the ball in game 2, Andrell didn't have a target. I thought Andrell would be a really focal point for McCarthy. I know they're rapport, but we didn't see that. And I don't think that this is a final takeaway. I think there's plenty of ball to be played, and I think the nature of the games that they've played so far, you don't have to force those guys the ball anytime soon. So we'll see what happens there, but those guys are certainly lower than they were before the season, because I had imagined Andrell Anthony would end up being the number 1 target, and he still very well may become that. And I thought the tight ends would be right behind him, and again, that still very well may happen too. So, all right, we will wrap up with a bit of a prediction-ish type thing before we close out here. But I want you guys to decide who through 2 games, again, hard to take away a lot of things, but that's what we're going to do a little bit here. Because I had a UConn, there's not a whole lot to preview. There's not a whole lot of things to talk about as it pertains to that. But from last night, any breakout players from the starting group? Okay, so let's think about the 2 deep here. Any guys who were out there last night that quote unquote kind of broke out, whether that be a guy who was already really good and shows he can get a lot better, or a guy who is maybe, cemented in the 2 deep that's now flashing potential starter type of minutes. And I'll start to give you guys some time to think that one through. And I mean, Josh, you talked about CJ Stokes. I think he's certainly a candidate there, especially given the opportunity he might have if Edwards doesn't play next week. But if I had to come up with one, honestly, and this more so applies to a guy who was at that real high level that's only getting better. And man, we're just seeing some really good play from Junior Colson. And I know he hasn't seen an offense that's worth a damn yet, but his speed hashes to hashes, it's just night and day compared to Josh Ross. And everyone kind of talked about what you're sacrificing in getting that from Colson. And that's someone who's not as smart as Josh Ross when it comes to play recognition. And I think that's natural. I think that comes with time. I think that comes with reps. I think you get better at defending the run when you have to defend the run, when your team's always up and you're consistently in pass coverage. Obviously, you're going to be better there. So I think it's going to come in time for him. I don't know if we're there quite yet. I don't think it's fair to even evaluate it yet. But I do think he has proven through 2 games that he certainly belongs in Michigan's defense. And I know he proved that a little bit last year, but he had to carry a big weight this year, taking over for not only a team captain, but really a pillar and a mainstay of Michigan's program through tumultuous times over these past few years. Josh Ross has kind of always been there, similar to Hutchinson, right? He was kind of always there. Jake Moody, always there, right? So one of those guys, one of those glue guys. And so he had a large weight to carry on this year. And I think Colson's done through 2 games a pretty darn good job. So I'll pass it over to Josh and your breakout through 2 here.
Yeah, I think I want to stay on defense too and say Mike Sainristil. I think he's been really solid these last 2 weeks. Jim Harbaugh back-to-back weeks has commented after games just, how Sainristil has been everywhere, all over the field. And really he is. You look at every play that's, beyond the line of scrimmage, and Mike Sainristil is going to be around the ball. So it's I think he would be my pick. You know, I have a couple of guys in mind, but I don't want to list them off because just in case someone else takes them. But yeah, I think my guy would be Mike Sainristil. I've been really impressed with him, and you know, and his speed is just a huge asset to, you know, the defense. And Harbaugh also mentioned too, kind of likened his speed to what Dax was able to do speed wise out there as well last year, and I absolutely agree. It's always good to have, you know, that type of speed out there from sideline to sideline as your, you know, as your nickel back. And you know, I only think his play is going to increase just as the, you know, as the talent will increase as the season goes on. So yeah, major props to Sainristil for making the switch and also proving that he belongs.
All right, Trevor, your elected individual.
Sure. Like Josh, I could probably name quite a few dudes here, but my guy right now through 2 games is Jalen Harrell. You know, a lot of my off-season predictions based around the assumption that Harrell was going to continue to be strong in the run game, serve more like a Sam linebacker, but Taylor Upshaw, Braden McGregor, some of these other guys were going to come in on the pass rush. And through 2 games, Jalen Harrell is the best pass rusher on this Michigan defense. He's got 6 quarterback hurries, 2 sacks. He grades out as one of the top defenders. He's lining up in that edge role. He's lining up like a defensive end. He's lining up like a linebacker in coverage, and he's doing well in all spots. So, you know, again, I kind of anticipated, you know, Michigan's 5-man fronts, he would be out there, or, you know, he'd be rotating in a similar role where Upshaw would be the pass rusher like Ojabo was, and Harrell would come in the run game. But at this point, it's hard to take Jalen Harrell off the field. So I do think you're still going to see some guys 3rd down roles develops with McGregor, Anoma, Derek Moore. But right now, Jalen Harrell's the clear, you know, Mike Morris is more of a, I don't know, Chris Wormley, Taco Charlton kind of guy, Rashawn Gary anchor role, and he's excelling at that. But in terms of quickness getting to the quarterback, Harrell's my guy through 2 games.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. He's a guy who's just, you know, eye test to numbers and grades and all that. He's really checked all boxes and really, I think might be the fastest rising guy in this team. Now that you bring him up, I went to Colson because I think he might be the most impactful long term. But Harrell and what he's been able to do certainly shine because Michigan certainly needs it in replacing Ojabo and Hutch. So, Brock, over to you, my friend.
Yeah, I've got 2 guys, if that's all right. I'm going to go a little off the wall like Davis did last time. Hopefully Davis and Libby don't get too mad that I'm taking 2. But the 3 of you guys started with the defense, and I'm going to stay right there. DJ Turner and Jamon Green, we heard all fall camp about how they were both excelling. They were both pushing each other to get better. And through 2 games, I know obviously it's Colorado State and Hawaii. That's a given, and we know their talent level is low, but they have yet to be beat. There's only been 1 passing touchdown. That was on Will Johnson against Colorado State. And DJ Turner, he had that fumble recovery in week 1. That was kind of more of a right place at the right time kind of thing. That wasn't necessarily anything that he did great. But Jamon Green had some nice plays last night against Hawaii, and I see what they can do against some tougher competition, maybe against Taulia on the 24th and further on into the season.
Yeah, Jamon Green was lights out last night. I mean, he almost had like 3 picks 3 different times. He was just playing really well. The technique was there for him, and you can just tell. I think his hips look about 100 times better and more fluid out there. So, Libby, over to you, sir. If you want to talk about anything besides recruiting, that is. I know you're very selective. I want to make sure that it's okay that you decide who your favorite breakout player is so far.
I mean, I could stick with recruiting and say Jane Davis commits, not anytime soon, but he'll end up being a Wolverine. As a player, though, and an actual player, though, Cade McNamara is the 3rd string quarterback next week. So that's my prediction.
Just totally goes away from the subject matter. You can tell this guy's been working the phones and has not been listening to the show at all. Just came back like, well, if I had to make a prediction, Jaden Davis, even though we have like 6 forecasts on him, he's gonna go to Michigan. So granted, you were one of the first ones, so I'm gonna give you credit, but
people listen to the YouTube channel and maybe not go on Rivals, so maybe they don't know.
Well, bless your heart. Davey, if you've been listening with your swaggy headphones and
I have been
awesome hair.
I have been.
I didn't
Thank
even
you.
know the adjective to describe it, but I love it.
Box braids would be the best way to describe it.
You look like Travis Scott and Kylie Jenner's next baby. It's a shame everyone's on mute because everyone's laughing. For all the people at home who don't know. Josh isn't, though, because Josh hates my humor. All right, Davis. Who's your breakout?
Zach stole it right before I went on, and I'm very disappointed, but I'm going to stick with it anyway. Davis Warren, and likewise, I love his name. I think it's outstanding, but Davis Warren is your second string quarterback. I don't know what else. I'm totally just, I've just gotten my heart ripped out with Zach taking that, and then Brandon calls me Kylie and Travis's kid, so I'm just out of it. But, Davis Warren's your backup quarterback. No disrespect to Cade. I've tried to give him as much props as I can, but Davis Warren comes in and looks the part. He looked outstanding, and like we had heard everything this offseason about him. I think his first pass went for 50-something yards, and now he fitted in between 3 defenders and hit Bredesen right in stride, who then took it for however many yards he went. But Davis Warren looked the part, and I think like Libby said, he's your quarterback too going forward. Personally, for me.
Yeah, he's got some things to prove still against some more legitimate opponents, but the same can be said about so many things involving Michigan football right now based on their schedule. So onward. We'll continue to find out about that. He certainly looked the part. I think you're definitely right about that. And the arm talent was as advertised in what we saw in limited time on Saturday night. So before we head out, does anyone have any closing thoughts or final words, pun intended?
Yeah, I got one thing if I could real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love AP poll and looking at it, and I even wrote this down just so I can make sure I got it right. Going into week 1, 303 points separated Michigan and Ohio State. Going into week 2, 172 points separated Michigan and Ohio State. And going into week 3, 116 points separate Michigan and Ohio State. And I think a lot of that has to do with J.J. McCarthy this last stretch. Him taking over, the media knows, everyone knows that he was the better player. And that gap between the two programs is getting less and less each time. With Notre Dame not looking as impressive as once, they were thought to be, the win that Ohio State had over them, it quite simply isn't what it was 2 weeks ago. And now McCarthy looks like he's every bit as the second best potentially quarterback in the Big Ten, behind C.J. Stroud, and Michigan looks outstanding. I think that gap is only going to get lesser and lesser as the season moves on. With Michigan having a pretty favorable schedule lining up, there's a realistic chance they start at minimum 5 or 6-0, and they have a realistic shot of being 11-0 heading into Columbus.
In a perfect world, both teams are, and there's nothing wrong with thinking that that's entirely possible, based not only on the two teams' schedule and Ohio State already getting past their obstacle, which was Notre Dame in the non-conference. And Davis, you make a great point. After their loss to Marshall, certainly does not look the same, especially given that it was at home, right? So you make great points, and the AP stat is a great representation of the J.J. McCarthy effect, which is something that I'm looking into as far as just number tracking, and you make a great reference in using the AP poll as a measuring stick for that to begin. So yeah, I think McCarthy absolutely changes things for this program. I think we all know that. I think we've said it since he got here, that eventually, inevitably, when he took over, whenever it was going to be, that things would change for the offense. When it was turnover prone, JJ, it was a little bit of for better or for worse, you think, when he was younger, just kind of when he was a freshman, you're kind of thinking like if he becomes the starter, you're sacrificing the right now for the then. But now it looks like he's a bit of a complete project. as Michigan is one game away from Big Ten play. They play UConn on Saturday. We'll have plenty of coverage of that on Maize Blue Review. You can find us on michigan.rivals.com. Make sure you sign up and join us inside the Den, the exclusive community of the Michigan Rivals platform, where we have all sorts of things for you guys to discuss among the members and learn about the football program through various intel from all of us here in many ways: football, basketball, baseball, hockey, recruiting, podcasts. We are multidimensional in many, many ways. So come join us. We'd love to have you. We'd love to get to know you. If you're curious about it, send us a message. All of our Twitter names are on the screen. If you're listening over your phone or in the car or whatever it may be, find us on Twitter at Michigan Rivals. The staff is all on there, and we'd be happy to guide you in how to sign up. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll talk to you next week for the roundtable. In between now and Saturday, we will have a daily show every day, and then we'll have a multitude of other podcasts. We have 3 other ones that air each week on top of Rise to the Victors and Dennis Fithian's Michigan Football Today. So with that being said, I'm Brandon Justice. For Josh Henschke, Trevor McHugh, Davis Mosley, Zach Libby, and Brock Heilig, this is the Maize Blue Review, and we will talk to you guys soon. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and if you're listening on Monday, enjoy your week, and maybe we'll see you at Michigan Stadium on Saturday.